was Hevel. Not everyone was able to carry on the line that was begun by Adam Harishon. And the primary seed of Adam Harishon that was meant to be the successor was Hevel. Ki hu haya domeh lo, because he was the most similar to him. V'kasher hargo Cain echav, but when Cain killed him, mipnei kin'ato bo, because he was envious of him, Natan lo tachtav shet. So the successor wasn't Cain. Cain's a murderer. Cain isn't going to be the prototype of the best human being. It's going to be Shet, who I think in English is known as Seth. V'haya domeh la'adam, and Shet was similar to Adam. My Rebbe always used to say, what happens to a father when he wakes up one morning and he finds that one son is dead and the other son is a murderer? What is he meant to do? And the only answer is he has another son, is to move on. On that devastating morning when Adam Harishon wakes up and he finds that Hevel is dead and Cain is a murderer. And that's it. So he moves on, and there comes Shet. V'haya segula v'lei v'zulato keklipa. V'sgulat Shet Enosh, and the person who continued from Shet was a man called Enosh. V'chein higia ha'inyan ad Noach, and this continued until we got to Noach. V'yechidim hayu levavot, there were individuals who were the ikar. Domim la'adam, v'nikra'im b'nei Elohim, and they were called the children of God. Shleimim b'briatam, they were perfect in their health, uv'midotam, in their values, uv'arichut hayamim, in their length of days, and in their wisdom and capabilities. Uv'imeihem anu monim mi'adam ba'ad Noach, v'chein mi'Noach ba'ad Abram. Then we carry on these generations from Noach until we get to Abraham. Ve'efshar shaya mehem mi shelo dabat bo ha'inyan ha'elohi, Terach, and there were people who were not holy people like Terach. Aval Abraham beno haya talmid la'avi aviv Evel. It's a chiddush of the Kusari that Abraham was not called Abraham ha'ivri for the reasons we suggested in previous weeks, that he was on one side and everyone was on the other, but he was called Abraham ha'ivri because he was directly related to Ever. Ivri is Ever. V'od shehisig Noach ba'atzmo, he even surpassed Noach. We talked about that. V'haya ha'inyan eloki davei ben me'avot avotam el b'nei banim. V'Abraham segulat Ever v'talmido v'alken nikra Ivri. That's why Abraham was called Ivri, because he is the Talmud of Ever. V'Ever yaskulat Shem v'Shem yaskulat Noach. Noach came to Shem. Shem was Ever. Ever is Abraham. מפני שהוא יורש האקלימים השווים אשר הם סייתם וחמדתם מארץ כנען אל אדמת הנבואה. ויצא יפת אל הצפון, יפת went to the north, וחם went to the south, and Ham went to the south, וסגולת אברהם מכל בניו יצחק. And the chosen one from Abraham was Yitzchak. We're just catching up as to where we got to so far. והרחיק כל בניו מהארץ הזאת המסוגלת כדי שתהיה מיוחדת ליצחק. And Abraham distanced everyone else from his family so that this land would be for Yitzchak. Not for Yishmael. Yishmael went elsewhere, but this land would be for Yitzchak. וסגולת Yitzchak is Yaakov. And the scholar of Yitzchak, now we're reaching this week's parsha, is Yaakov. ונדחה עשיו אחיו מפני שזכה יעקב בארץ ההיא. Esav is discarded and Yaakov merits this land. And now we reach a totally new klal. ובני יעקב כולם סגולה. No one is discarded in the family of Yaakov. Everyone is considered to be part of this family, part of the continuation of the idea. כולם ראויים לעניין האלוהי, all of them are worthy of this godly matter. והיה להם המקום ההוא המיוחד בעניין האלוהי, and Israel was the place that was to happen. וזה היה תחילת כל העניין האלוהי על הקהל. And this is the first time in this week's parsha that the godly idea falls on a community and not on individuals. The big difference between Sefer Bereshit and Sefer Shemot, which we'll discuss further, please God, in Sefer Shemot, is that the Sefer Bereshit is a book about individuals. It's very easy in the annals of history to see great individuals. But the greatest task of an individual, everyone there is great. Sefer Shemot is transition from individuals to a nation, to the nation of the Jewish people, but it begins here with Yaakov. Yaakov is the first family, and no one is discarded. אחרי אשר לא היה נמצא כי אם ביחידים, וישמרם אלוהים, ויפרם וירבם ויגדילם במצרים, and then we continued and we were fruitful and we multiplied in Egypt, כאשר יגדל האילן, as a tree would grow, אשר שורשו טוב עד שהוציאם פרי שלם דומה לפרי הראשון, until it creates fruit which are similar to the original fruit. רצוני לומר אברהם יצחק יעקב ויוסף ואחיו. והיה מן הפרי משה אהרון ומרים וכמו בצלאל ואליהו וכמו ראשי המטות and at that stage we were worthy of getting the Torah, of getting hashgacha. ואם היו ביניהם ממרים היו נגאלים, ואם היו ביניהם ממרים היו נגאלים, and if there were people who rebelled, they were rejected. אכן בלי ספק סגולה. What is a major difference we see between Bereshit and Shemot in who is a Jew? We see that a Jew is not necessarily defined by a parent in Sefer Bereshit. Otherwise, Esav would be a Jew. Esav had a believing mother and a believing father, as opposed to Ishmael, whose mother was Hagar. She came from an idolatrous background and didn't necessarily follow Abraham's lead. Ishmael leaves the fold. Esav is born from the same parent as Yitzchak was born. Yet Esav is not part of the Jewish family. And at that stage, it would appear that a Jew is being defined by his beliefs and not by his genealogy. This changes. This changes as soon as we get to Yaakov. But I'm going to point out one further thing. Just for your understanding, it's not really my subject today, but if you look at the Ari HaKadosh, what the Krus Ari has explained here is that we started with Abraham, we went to Yitzchak, not Ishmael, Yaakov, not Esav, Yitzchak, not Esav, and then Yaakov and his whole family. The thing is, the brothers didn't know that. And if you want to understand what happened with Yosef and his brothers, you need to understand that. What do I mean to say? I mean, in the same way that Sarah identified Ishmael as being a non-starter, in the same way that Rivka discarded Esav, the brothers thought Yosef was Esav. The brothers discarded Yosef not because of a brotherly jealousy that they had. That would be very petty and tedious and not really relevant to a book of the Torah, but because they identified Yosef to be not shayach to the family. How do I know this to be true? You just look at the story. You see, this was a struggle. It's clear afterwards that once they got rid of Yosef, they would have been Yehuda and Reuven, because they were always strong. But that didn't happen. As soon as Yosef was either sold or put in the bar, whichever rabbi taught you, whatever he taught you, there was no more fighting. They sat down to eat. Now that sitting down to eat isn't just a sign of maybe callousness towards Yosef, it's shalva, it's peace. Which means it wasn't an ego trip, it wasn't a power struggle, it was to do with Yosef. They identified Yosef as being a problem in the same way that Rivka had identified Esav as being a problem, the same way that Sarah had identified Ishmael as being a problem, but they were wrong. There is one factor missing in the story of Yosef, and it's not to do with the fact that he was much younger than his brothers, because he really wasn't much younger than his brothers. That's very easily worked out in Parashat Vayetze, because all the children are born in the 7 years. They're all born. There was a first day where he married Leah by mistake. Then he marries Rachel and works another 7 years. After those 7 years, he starts to leave. The whole leaving process begins. In those 7 years, all of the children except for Binyamin were born, which means maximum 7 years between Reuben and Yosef, no more. So when we take Ben Zakunim and we look at Yosef, it's not because he was tiny and they were much older. It's probably because he didn't have a mother. The factor that is missing in the story of Yosef is there's no Sarah and there's no Rivka, and Leah doesn't have a standing in Yaakov's eyes, and Rachel has died. And perhaps had Rachel lived, the whole story of Yosef and his brothers wouldn't have developed in the way that it did. Just have a look at the Ari. I always thought this was just my idea, so I was excited when I saw it in the Ari. The brothers of Yosef thought that he was leftovers, so he was pasul. Klipa, they thought he was the shell. They thought that he was similar to Ishmael and Esau. That's why they rejected him. What the Ari writes. ומה גם בחושבה וגם ביסוד, they thought Yosef was damaged goods. מניחה ששון במה שהביא דיבתם רע עם ההפך השלום. You see the story of Yosef at the beginning of Parashat Vayeshev as such, that he brings bad words about his brothers, maybe in the same way that Esau tricked his father. He spoke badly. Speech, which is the yesod of a human being, ruach de malala, which differentiates a human being from anything else in the world. The ability to speak, and Yosef didn't speak well. And so on and so forth. And this you also see in the story of Yosef and his brothers. There is a friction not between the brothers and Yosef, but between Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher and the rest of the brothers. Why? Because Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher weren't born to Rachel or Leah. So Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, and Levi, Yisachar and Zevulun, they didn't respect Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Why? Because they didn't think they were part of the family. They didn't think they were part of the family. In the same way that Ishmael wasn't, and Esau wasn't, and Yosef wasn't. And this is something that needs clarifying as we go through the book of Bereshit, that to be part of this family doesn't mean that we are all the same. And that's really the theme I want to touch upon today. If you go over the page, a piece by Rav Amital, and then 2 pieces by Nativot Shalom, depending on how much time we have. The parsha begins with a pasuk which is open immediately for questioning. Ve'ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham, Abraham holid et Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. And why do I need that pasuk? Yitzchak ben Abraham would imply that Abraham holid et Yitzchak, correct? Even at the end of a long day on a Monday, with a pizza store, this means that Abraham holid et Yitzchak. I don't need a pasuk to tell me. The same Torah that gives me a couple of words to understand Avot Melachot suddenly tells me that Yitzchak ben Abraham is Abraham's son. So why? Rashi says, because the clouds, a lot have been said on this Rashi, The clowns of the generation were saying, Ma'avimelech nitabra Sarah. Remember, Sarah couldn't give birth for many, many years. Then Abraham said she was his sister. Avimelech took her, and then she got pregnant. So the workers were saying she didn't get pregnant from Abraham. She got pregnant from Avimelech. Because she had lived with Abraham for many years and not got pregnant. Ma'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sa klaster panav sheyitzhak domeh laAbraham ve'e'idu panav sheyitzhak domeh laAbraham ve'e'idu Abraham. God made it so that Yitzchak looked exactly like Abraham. So the pasuk should be read as follows, says Rashi. These are the generations of Yitzchak, and everyone else testified Abraham holided Yitzchak. That's Rashi. Okay. Rashi בעקבות חז"ל, see Rabbi Mital now, מוטרד מהכפילות שיש בפסוק הפותח את פרשתנו. So Rashi is bothered by the superfluous nature of the psukim here. הוא מסביר מדוע מתאר הכתוב פעם נוספת שאברהם הוליד את יצחק. According to Rashi, מכיוון שלקציני הדור טענו כי מאבימלך נתעברה שרה, דאג הקדוש ברוך הוא שיהיה פניו שיצחק דומות לשל אברהם. People were starting to gossip, and they said, this isn't Abraham's baby. So God made it so that he would look exactly like Abraham. If you've ever seen the Shame's children, they are all Shame's children. If you've ever seen the Horowitz children, they are Rav Yonatan's Echad al Echad. If you knew Jeremy when he was 17 and you've seen his 17-year-old children, they're all little Jeremys. If you knew me when I was 3, then you can see my children when they were 3 were very similar to me. Not so much now, kind of, it's hard to tell, a lot of jungle. The Gemara doesn't say clowns, doesn't talk about clowns. And like the Gemara says, this is very important. When often you stand up for a Dvar Torah, you say Rashi quotes a midrash, Rashi almost never quotes. He uses a midrash, he uses a Gemara, and he changes the words. He changes the words, and you've got to be very, very aware of Rashi changing words and people changing midrashim. I have to tell you one thing here because it's so shy to what's going on. At the beginning of this week's parasha, we hear about Yaakov and Esau fighting in the womb. They are fighting inside the womb. And Rivka says, Lama ze anochi. I have much to say on that, but not now, unfortunately, because pizza awaits. Rashi says that when she passed the house of Avodah Zarah, Esau wanted to go out. And when she passed the place of Torah, Yaakov wanted to go out. Correct? That's what Rashi says. The Kli Yakar says, and if you didn't know it, you wouldn't know it. And if you didn't listen, you wouldn't be aware. The Kli Yakar says that when she passed the place of Avodah Zarah, Esau tried to get out and Yaakov stopped him. And when she passed the place of Torah, Yaakov tried to go out and Esau stopped him. There is a world, ladies, between Rashi and Kli Yakar. The Torah of Rashi here is live and let live. That Esau couldn't care less what Yaakov was doing. Couldn't care less about Yaakov. And so if Yaakov wants to go out in a place of Torah, he can, as long as he lets me go out of a place of Avodah Zarah. The Yaakov describes a totally different reality. Esau would not let us be. He would not let us be. We just want, how much land do these people have? Do you know how small our country is? Do you know how big Egypt is? Do you know how big Saudi Arabia is and Iraq? Why can't they leave us alone? They will not let us be. It's a totally different picture of a battle. The world won't let us be. Who Esau is a different discussion altogether. Esau could be Christianity. They won't let us be. We just want a little piece of the land in the world, a tiny piece in this world to just sit quietly, not doing anyone any harm. We have Arab Chavri Knesset. They're allowed to say whatever they want to say. They say whatever they want to say.
They're allowed to support terrorists, to visit terrorists in prison. That's how democratic Israel is. That would not happen in America. That would not happen in London. They're searching for people in London who went to the demonstration on Shabbos with a Hamas mask on. But it happens here. It's a totally different definition of Esav. The Esav in Rashi is, you do what you want, I'll do what I want, just leave me alone. But the Esav in the Kli Yakar is a totally different Esav. You're not going out there. You want to learn Torah, I'm going to stop you. And because Esav is absolute evil, so Yaakov will stop him. Whether the world recognizes it or not, Yaakov has to stop Esav because he is real evil. I lost my place. Okay. Hagmara eina mazkira, sorry, 6th line down. Eina mazkira talei sanim elai kol umot ha'olam. It wasn't just Sanim, it was the whole world were joking at Abraham. Bachar Rashi lahadgish et mekomam liton dafka b'shmam keneged yichuso shel Yitzchak. Rav Amital wants to suggest, it's a bit sermonic, but it runs straight into the theme of Netivot Shalom. Why would God make Yitzchak look like Abraham just because of a few jokers? What Rav Amital goes into here is that Yitzchak wasn't, the joke that people were making about Yitzchak was that he was so different from Abraham. When we go into the realms of Chassidut, we talk about Midot. So Abraham, we spoke about a number of times, it was Chesed, Ahava. We see it in all of the stories of Abraham that he is tested and challenged in the area of Ahava, of love. And Yitzchak did not. He was not overt. He was not an extrovert. He didn't go out and gather the masses. Yitzchak, by definition, was Gevura. Gevura is not just fear of God, it's containment. It's limiting. Ahava is overflowing. Ahava comes from hav, which is to give. Ahava is giving. It's giving and going outwards. And Abraham was megayeret anashim, and Sarah was megayeret anashim. He went out and converted. He went out and he had an idea. He spread it. Yitzchak stayed at home. Yitzchak never left Israel. Yitzchak was holy. He never left. He didn't go out. He didn't do anything. When I've tried to explain Yitzchak, so if you look at the stories of Yitzchak, leave the Akedah out for the moment, because I did mention in the Akedah it was Elokim Nasarat Abraham. And Chazal made a point of making Yitzchak a hero. But what are the stories of Yitzchak, ladies? The stories of Yitzchak are digging wells. That is it. The film starring Yitzchak is a lot less interesting than the original Abraham. The original Abraham has Lech Lecha, it has an Exodus, it has a war, it has throwing Ishmael out the house, it has the Akedah, which keeps everyone on their seats until the last minute. And Yitzchak digs wells. Really, really mind-blowing stories. Yitzchak dug a well, the Plishtim filled it in. Yitzchak dug another well, the Plishtim filled it in. Yitzchak dug another well, and the well stayed forever. Well, that's absolutely wonderful. Why would the Torah tell us about digging wells? I thought about this a long time. And it just happened, I had such an experience earlier on in my life where I understood the importance of that. When I was your age and sitting in yeshiva, someone once came up to me. I was sitting in the base medrash. There weren't many people in the base medrash. I think it was Hanukkah time. And they said, do you want to start a new yeshuv? I was sitting there with a friend of mine, and I said, yeah, I'm game. Yeah. No parental permission, nothing. No telephones, lady, nothing. Do you want to start? Yeah. So there's a yeshuv about 20 minutes away from Alon Shor. Now it's 40 years old. I was there the first night. It took me and a friend. We were there the first night. It's in the middle of a field. It's called Karmei Tzur. If you've ever heard of Karmei Tzur. We were there the first night, surrounded by Arab villages and dogs barking. I don't think I ever told my mum exactly about what we did that night. We sat in tents, and we were there the first night. We went again another time. The first thing they did when setting up this yeshuv was a source of water. Why? Because you can't live without water. You can live without electricity because you can make fire. You can't live without water. If you understand that, go back to the story of Yitzhak and the wells. So Yitzhak, they filled in the wells that Abraham had dug. Why did they fill in the wells that Abraham had dug? Because Abraham had ideology. Abraham had a belief. And how did Abraham spread his biology? He created Yeshuvim. He created colonies. And in each colony, there were believers of Abraham. It was an Abraham Yeshuvah, Abrahamic colony. So what did the Plishtim do? They filled in the water. And what happens when you fill in the water? People move away because they can't live there. The point of the Plishtim is to destroy Abraham's idea. So what did Yitzchak do? He dug the well again. So what did they do? They filled the well in again. So Yitzchak kept digging and digging and digging until they left him alone. So what does that turn Yitzchak into? I'll tell you a different story. When I lived on kibbutz a few years later, so I went to kibbutz, very romantic. I wanted to have a shovel on my shoulder, drive a tractor, and learn Gemara, Torah, Avodah, and the whole geschäft. I mamish had the dream. Thing was, what I had in my immature mind was that kibbutz would be a swamp. And I was going to go to this swamp like they did in the first and second aliyot, and I was going to drain the swamp, and I was going to build houses out of nothing, and I was going to live in the mud, and we were going to build. And I arrived at kibbutz, and it was built, and they had houses and a shul and a cheder ochel. So I was invited to a family for Sudah Shlishit. I always get invited once. It's the second time never works. So I was invited to a family for Sudah Shlishit. It was an American family, it's an American Garin that built that kibbutz. And they asked me how I was enjoying kibbutz. You shouldn't ask English people questions like that because they won't give you the polite answer. They'll just tell you the truth. And I said, well, it's a bit of a letdown, really. Conversation stopped. And then they said to me, well, why is it a letdown? So I was trying to identify why it was a letdown. And I said, because, you see, when I came here, I thought I was going to build something and everything's built already. And then they laughed at me as if to say, idiot. And they said to me as follows, why did we ask your group of people to come here? Because we are about 10 years older than you, and you're about 10 years older than our children. If you don't continue the idea we started, there won't be an idea. It's one thing to break ground, it's another thing to consolidate. It's much harder to consolidate than it is to break ground. You understand? If you break ground, if you have a new idea like Avraham and you go out there with your ahava, that's fantastic. However, it's hard, but you get the glory. You can see you've done something. If I'm told to take on someone else's idea, it's not mine. It's not mine. I don't get any glory for it. No ego boost here. I'm just carrying on an idea. I'm consolidating an idea. It means I really have to believe, like Yitzhak gets no glory. It's not, Yitzhak's just in the middle. Without Yitzhak, you can't have Yaakov. You understand that? If you don't consolidate an idea, you cannot build on that idea. You have to consolidate an idea. There was no consolidation, Lahavdil Elef Havdalot, to communism. Communism just disappeared because cruel people like Stalin took over. There was no one to consolidate the idea. There was no middle generation. It was just taken over by villains and sadists. And idea needs to be consolidated. Yitzhak is in the middle. But what Rav Amital wants to say, you might have thought Yitzhak's nothing like Abraham. One of the ideas that Rav Amital says, which I think in a different shiur, is that the reason that Yitzhak liked Esav so much is because Yaakov was too much like Yitzhak. Because Yaakov was an Ish Tam Yoshev Oalim. Yaakov was a good Yid. And Yitzchak thought, he's just like me. I need someone who's going to go out there like Abraham did. Esav is an extrovert. That's why the head of Esav is in Marat HaMachpelah. Because the head of Esav was a thinker. He was a creator. He was just bad. But Yaakov, Yitzchak was convinced that Yaakov was like him. And so he didn't want Yaakov to carry on. He actually wanted Esav to carry on. This, ladies, is exactly what's going on this week's parsha with Rivka. This is a brilliant piece by Rabbi Hirsch, a question which is so obvious, but when you don't ask it, you ask yourselves, why didn't I ask this question? And then you answer very quickly, because he is Rav Hirsch and I'm not. Have you ever played a trick? No. I have. Have you ever done something naughty? No. I have. The major aim when you do something naughty, besides the naughty act that you do, is not to get caught. The 11th commandment, right? Don't get caught. That's always been, like, don't get caught. You're going to do it, don't get caught. If you get caught, pay the price. Rav Hirsch asks this classic question. Rivka dresses Yaakov up as Esav, correct? Going to get caught. Esav's going to walk in 5 minutes later. This is the most ridiculously stupid plan. Yaakov goes in dressed up as Esav, gets a bracha. He doesn't get a piece of cake. He gets a bracha. Ladies, a bracha can be changed like this. A bracha can be changed into a klala like this. It's not a piece of gold. It's a bracha. If I don't have kavanah in my bracha, it doesn't count. What a stupid plan. He dresses him up as Esav when everyone knows that 5 minutes later, Esav's going to walk through the door. It's a good question, no? It's a silly plan. So Rav Hirsch asked the question, what was Rivka doing? What was she thinking? So you dress up Yaakov as Esav. Yaakov gets a bracha. It's a 2-minute win. 2 minutes later, Esav walks in. Yitzchak is furious, curses Yaakov. That's what should have happened. So what's going on? Exactly what I just said is going on, says Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch says, Yitzchak was convinced that Yaakov was like him. He says he's an ishtam. There's no creativity in him. There's no extrovert. And Rivka said, you don't know your son. You don't know who Yaakov is. Yitzchak says, don't tell me who I know and I don't know. So Rivka plays a trick on him. And she brings in Yaakov dressed up as Esav. And then Esav walks in afterwards and Yaakov realizes, and Rivka looks at Yitzchak and says, so Yaakov can trick you. So Yaakov's not just an ishtam. You didn't even understand that was Yaakov standing in front of you. So how do you know who Esav is? How do you know who Yaakov is? You don't perceive anything here, but Yaakov can do. Yaakov can act. Yaakov can do things. You just don't understand the situation. And because he was so convinced, therefore he didn't change the bracha. He understood. He always wanted Yaakov to be a main part of the family, but he thought there was going to be a partnership between Esav and Yaakov, like there is between Yisachar and Zevulun. But she said, no, Esav is qualitatively bad. Yaakov is something else. So we have differences in characters and differences in roles. So you have Avram, who is chesed, ahava. And even though Yitzchak isn't chesed, Yitzchak is consolidating. He's internal. He doesn't go out. He doesn't get any more people. By the way, we don't know where these people went. All these people that Avram converted, they're not at the end of Sefer Bereshit. They don't exist anymore. 70 souls went down to Egypt and they are all Bnei Yaakov. None of the people that Avram and Sarah Megayeh, they didn't go down to Egypt. I don't know where they went. Maybe they stayed there. But they didn't. They disappeared. The Yitzchak is the introvert, is Gevura. Gevura is when you control yourself. You are able to, you're a Gibor. Who is Ezahu Gibor? HaKovesh Yisrael, a person who can contain himself. And Abraham is Chesed. What happens when you combine Abraham and Yitzchak? What do you get? You get Yaakov. Turn over the page. Have a look at the Nativot Shalom. But maybe I'll run out of time. Let me tell you the Netivot Shalom first one, and then we'll read the second one. In the first Netivot Shalom, so Netivot Shalom asks the question, why does the Akedah start off, Ha'elokim nisa et Abraham? We're not talking about Yitzhak here. Ha'elokim nisa et Abraham. Ladies, there are two major reflective words reflecting God. Yud Kei Vav Kei and Elokim. Yud Kei Vav Kei reflects what? Mercy, Rachamim. Elokim is judgment. So it doesn't say Hashem nisa et Abraham. It doesn't say Yud Kei Vav Kei nisa et Abraham. It says Elokim nisa et Abraham. What does it say at the end of the Akedah? Ata yadati ki yerei Elohim ata. Now I know that you fear God. But Abraham is ohev. He's not fearing. Netivot Shalom says something quite incredible here. In all the challenges that Abraham had hitherto, he had been tested in the area of love, of chesed. He was sent to war. He didn't want to fight. He was told to throw out Ishmael. He didn't want to throw out Ishmael. He was told to kill his son. Now, all of the acts a person does out of love for God are acts of giving. When God tells you to kill your son, that's not love of God. You don't do that because you love God. You do that because you fear God. You don't kill people because you love God. They do that. We don't kill people because we love God. It's because God told him to do it. It doesn't make any sense, but God told him to do it. Ha'elokim nisa et Abraham. In the Akedah, Abraham is being tested in the area of fearing God. So far, he's proved he loves God. And what about from Yitzhak's perspective? Yitzhak has Gevurah. You don't give up your life to God with Gevurah. You give up your life to God because you love God. The test for Abraham in the Akedah is to fear God. The test for Yitzhak in the Akedah is to love God. It says Netivot Shalom, the word Akedah means to bind. It's the binding of Abraham and Yitzhak together. What happens when you bind the love of God and the fear of God together? You reach emet, you reach truth, which is the final product, which is Yaakov. That's why you don't need to disperse the family after Yaakov. What is Ahavat Hashem? The Ramban says Ahavat Hashem is mitzvot aseh. What is Yirat Hashem? Fear of God is mitzvot lo ta'aseh. Because when you love God, you want to do. You love someone, you want to do for them. You don't do things because you fear. There are many people in Judaism, they love the loving side. They love getting excited. They love singing. They love dancing. They like all the positive sides of Judaism. But when they have to do a halacha, you see a given shul on a Friday night, Kabbalat Shabbat doing a Klali Bach, everyone is dancing and jumping up and down and singing, got their eyes closed. And then you get to a minyan and they all go outside. No Kriyat Shema. The halacha, going to dance, I'll dance. Halacha, no. So people have ahava, right? They have a lot of ahava, but they don't have yirah. You have other people on the other side, they're very miserable. All they're ever doing is halacha. You have to eat, because on Matzah, on Pesach night, you have to eat 5 kazetim according to the Mishnah Berurah. So by the end, they've got indigestion, right? They've got their clock on the table, and they're stuffing the matzah. I know, because I used to do it. They're stuffing the matzah down, and they have to eat it. And they spend the rest of the evening before Afikam and in the bathroom, because they just drank cups of wine and 5 kazetim of matzah, 2 minutes on average, because so Shulchan Aruch says that. But they have no ahava, they don't enjoy it, right? They're sitting in the sukkah, they're sitting in the sukkah, they don't enjoy their sukkah. Oh, maybe there's not enough schach there, maybe this is it's not. No. We need to combine the ahava and the yirah. You only get to truth if you combine ahava and yirah together. So Abraham and Yitzhak aren't the same, they're opposites. But when you combine it, you do the Akedah, you get to Yaakov. Turn over the page to the last comment here of the Netivot Shalom. וכדי שתהיה העבודה בקביעות צריך אדם להחזיק בבית המידות. You need both midot in order to serve God. שיעבוד להשם יברכם במידת האהבה והן במידת ההפחית מידת היראה. אהבה is letting go, letting it flow, singing, jumping up and down. Getting into it. That's ahava. Emotion. Let the emotion be. You understand? Yira is containment of emotion. Midat hayira, shebeit hamidot yachtav mehavim shleimut. The two midot, they complement each other, but they can't live without each other. ועל שניהם יחדיו תיקון עבודה בכלום, וזו הייתה מידתו של יעקב. We're heading, that's what the Kuzari says. You have Avram, you have Yitzchak, you get to Yaakov. Once you get to Yaakov, you have Emet. What is Emet? Emet is Ahava and Yira together. That's מידתו של יעקב אבינו. מידת תפארת הכוללת אהבה ויראה. ועל כן היא נקראת מידת אמת. That's what truth is. If you have one, you don't have the other, you're missing something. You're missing, if you don't have the excitement, you're missing something. Judaism without Hasidus is dead. But Hasidus without Halakha is dead as well. It needs to be both. כמו דכתיב תיתן אמת ליעקב, באשר היא מתקיימת לעד, כדכתיב שפת אמת תיכון לעד, כי בית המידות יחדיו הם אמת. Only if you combine Yira and Ahava together, you get to Emet, which is Yaakov, and therefore the Kuzari is right. You get to Yaakov, you don't need to split people up anymore. You need the Midah of Abraham. That has to be first. The love has to be first. Love has to dictate. In everything that we do, our love has to dictate. And then it has to be controlled and directed. It can't work the other way. Because if you're controlling things from the beginning, how can you love? You're not letting yourself emote. You're not letting yourself express yourself. You have to be able to do this. You have to be able to do this. Jeremy in Poland will teach you loads of songs. Jeremy loves teaching songs. I will teach you one song. The song is a song I learned from Rebbe Nachman. I teach in Kotsk. It's got no words and it has no sections to it. It is a scream. It's to scream at the height of your voice with your arms wide open and scream. And you look at me now and say, I'm not doing that. You are doing that, ladies, or I'll leave you in Kotsk. I'll get on the bus and drive to Lublin. You are doing that, and we will do it. As long as you can't see anyone else, because we'll do it in the dark, you will do it. And then you'll get such liberation, letting something out, let it out, as opposed to control, and ipuk all the time. You have to have the control, but only once you've had the love. You have to have the love first, and then the control. If you're controlling everything, when are you ever a human being? When do you ever emote? When do you ever say anything? When do you ever express yourself? You have to be able to express and control ahava and yira, and you get to emet. כי בית המידות יחדיו הם אמת שמתקיימים לעד. מה שאין כן כל מידה בפני עצמה אינה יכולה להתקיים. If you only love, it won't work. We saw what happened these people were genuine people in the 60s. They were genuine people. They were spiritual people. It was just love. It was free love. It was just love. It was just freedom without control, without any kind of boundary. And it went nowhere and achieved nothing. ועל פי זה מפרש דברי המדרש יותר זקן בני בנים ודברי בנים אותם. והנה אברהם הייתה מידתו חסד ואהבה ששייך בזה בחינת מותר ומשיגים. So Abraham was chesed and ahava. But because Ahava is not perfect on its own, there were bad parts of it, which was Ishmael. And Yitzhak was only Gvura, and therefore part of Yitzhak wasn't perfect. But when you put Abraham and Yitzhak together in the Akedah, you come out with Yaakov. So I titled this, ladies, Ashreinu Matov Chelkeinu. Just one more piece. Have a look at the last paragraph. He says that's what it's got to do with Shabbat, because Shabbat is the truest day of the week, because Shabbat has Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. Just like the first two commandments, Anochi v'lo yeh, is b'dibur echad. Why? Says the Tivot Shalom, Anochi Hashem Elochech is a positive commandment. It's loving God. Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim is a prohibition. It's yirah. B'dibur echad ne'emah. They were said together because you need to combine ahava and yirah together. And so he says with Shabbat, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. Because Shamor is to observe Shabbat. It's to not do Boreh, not do Bishul, not do Dash, not do Lash, not do all 39. No. But what about Zachor? Positively Shabbat. What about Zachor? Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. They have to be done together. So what's Ashreinu Matov Chelkeinu? We are B'nai, not just B'nai Avraham and not B'nai Noach, not just B'nai Yitzchak and not B'nai Ishmael. We're B'nai Yaakov. I told you, we don't walk alone. We walk with truth. Truth is a combination of both. Now I want to, in the 6 minutes I have left, our rabbi is called Cheshvan, Mar Cheshvan, because there are no Chagim in Cheshvan. So unfortunately, we've had a Mar Cheshvan in every way. A bitter Cheshvan. From start to end. A bitter Cheshvan. A Cheshvan like I've never had before. But we've left Cheshvan. In fact, even when Dr. Yocheved said it's not yet Rosh Chodesh, it was already Rosh Chodesh. It was Rosh Chodesh, and it is Rosh Chodesh. What is Hanukkah, ladies? There is a phenomenal difference between Shabbat and Hanukkah. Shabbat, we light the candles inside the house. The point of lighting candles, halachically greater, is to light up the house. It's the only meal during the week that you have to eat when it's dark. Correct? You don't have to eat supper on any regular day when it's dark. You can eat whenever you want, and that's what they did. But on Friday night, you have to eat the meal when it's dark because you can't make Shabbos before. You can't damage. Friday night, you have to eat the meal when it's dark because you can't make Shabbos before. You can't damage Kabbalat Shabbat. As Shkia goes, and then Mariv is Mariv, right? And then you come home and eat. You have to eat in the dark. For Shalom Bayit, that it would be nicer if you've ever eaten in darkness, and I'm sure South African people here can tell you about that. If you've ever eaten in darkness, then you know how miserable it is to eat in darkness, how uncomfortable it is to eat in darkness. So the halacha on Shabbos is light up the house. And the halacha isn't just 2 candles, right? The real halacha is light up every light in the house. You should have kavanah when you made the bracha for all the lights in the house. There should be more light. I've got a special light in my house that I only light on Shabbos. It's a special electricity light. I only light that light on Shabbos. Sometimes other people light it, but I only light it on Shabbos. I only press a button on Shabbos. It'll be much light as possible. What do you do with Hanukkah, ladies? What an extraordinary, ridiculous halacha it appears to be. When you do it properly, you're going to see, please God, you see the old city, you never seen anything like it. Never seen anything like it. All of these beautiful walls will be covered with candles and oil outside. When I was a kid, we used to count Christmas trees in December, and in Israel I count Hanukkah all outside. That's the halacha, it's put outside the house. Now, in addition to that, the Tivot Shalom says, in addition to that, it's not just outside the house. It has to be just above Asara Tefachim, quite low. And it says something else, notice about Hanukkah, which is normally the case. It happens in the darkest month of the year, December. The shortest day of the year is in December, Northern Hemisphere. It happens at the darkest time of the month, on the 25th of Kislev, when you can hardly see the moon. Tivot Shalom tells us that the point of Shabbat is Olam Haba. Everything's light, absolute clarity. The point of Hanukkah is going into the darkness and creating light in the darkness. Hanukkah is one of 2 festivals that we have in Galut, Purim and Hanukkah. They each have their own roles. But the whole purpose of Hanukkah is when you're in darkness to know that you can create light. We learned today in Rabbi Nachman. I tried to teach it in Rabbi Nachman. I'm not sure how successful it was, but we learned today in Rabbi Nachman. The situation is not defined by the situation, it's defined by you. Reality is defined by us. So darkness is only darkness if we let it be darkness. But we have every ability to light up the darkness. That's bringing purity into a Beit Mikdash. That's getting rid of the pig from the Beit Mikdash. But the whole point of Hanukkah is being outside and lighting it up outside. And the only people who can do this are people who have emet, who walk with truth. There's so much truth in this country. I don't think you can compare it to any country in the world. I don't think any country that I know of in the world checks itself and rechecks itself on every single thing it does. I just want to make sure you know, ladies, you do understand that the headquarters of Hamas is underneath the hospital. Do you know that my sons are risking their lives going in to try and beat Hamas on the ground? Do you know what America would do if there was a hospital with Hamas underneath the hospital? They would just drop one of their big bombs on the hospital and that place would disappear off the face of the earth. And because there are sick people in the hospital being held there by Hamas, and because Hamas won't let the doctors take the fuel that we're offering, so our army has been left with no choice but to manually enter this death trap. At the risk of the lives of our soldiers, show me a country that does that. Show me a country that does that. I don't even say it with critique. No country would do that in their right minds, but there's so much emet. There's so much emet of Yaakov. But when you put together, you understand we're not B'nai Noach, we're B'nai Abraham. Not B'nai Abraham, we're B'nai Yitzhak, but most importantly, we're B'nai Yaakov. And if Esav insists on trying to stop us going where we want to go, we will struggle with Esav, and truth will always prevail. Truth will always prevail. It sometimes takes a generation. It can sometimes take a century. But truth will always prevail. You know the Gemara, ladies. If you write the word emet in block Hebrew letters, every single letter has feet to it. The two bottoms of the Aleph, the Mem, and the two legs of the Taf. Sheker stands on the Kuf, stands on one leg. Anything that stands on one leg will ultimately be wiped aside. And therefore, I think we should, and I've told you in a number of shiurim, Ashreinu matov chelkeinu. We should be happy with our portion, because there is a process that starts with Abraham and Yitzchak and climaxes with Yaakov. Okay. בסדר?